Have you ever watched a musical and wondered how the composer chose each moment for a song? Whether you like them or you hate them, each song was written at each moment for a very specific reason, and today we're going to talk about what those reasons are. Hi y'all, I'm Cash the Composer, and I'm chronicling the process of writing a new musical on this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you're interested in writing a musical of your own, in theater in general, or you just want to listen to an artist ramble every Sunday. Today we're going to talk about song spotting, or the process of selecting the moments in a story where songs are needed. We can identify three big reasons for a song: plot, emotional, and technical. Within these three categories, we can break it down a little further. So without further ado, let's look at our first category: plot. Within any story, you're going to have particular beats of the plot that demand a song. There are any number of literary guides out there outlining the structure of a plot, but none of them are one size fits all. I recommend checking out the book The 7 Basic Plots to see a guide to common story structures, along with an analysis of why and how they work. Some stories have very obvious plot beats, such as the first act of Here We Are, where it's very clear where new songs should go. In the case of that particular show, it's whenever they go to a new place. But there are plenty that need to be looked in further detail. The structure that we all learn in school is the plot pyramid, which is a great starting point. We can identify within that 5 basic components: the exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the denouement. Fairly simply, the exposition and the denouement are going to be our opening and closing numbers, respectively, and the climax of the story, where everything comes to a head, is generally going to command a song as well. Think the final layer from Phantom of the Opera or the duel in Hamilton. The rising action comprises the majority of the songs in the show, usually, and the falling action is the time between the climax and the denouement. So let's look at those in reverse order. Typically, the falling action is very, very short, if it exists at all. Some shows essentially end at the climax, as with Phantom, and others go straight into the denouement, as in Hamilton. So let's look at 2 shows that have significant time between the two: Jesus Christ Superstar and Les Miserables. In JCS, one might look at the crucifixion as the climax, but I rather think it's the arrest. Everything in the show is building to that moment of betrayal, and everything thereafter is all about the fallout. You have Peter's denial, Pilate and Herod, the mourning of the apostles and Mary, Judas's death and return to bitch at Jesus for the confounding nature of the story itself, all the way to the denouement of the crucifixion. In Les Miserables, the climax lasts for several songs, beginning with the death of Gavroche, with the bloodbath of the battle, through to the sewers. The falling action begins with Javert's suicide, leading to the denouement of Jean Valjean's peaceful death. Everything in between, empty chairs at empty tables, the wedding, serves the same purpose as the falling action songs of JCS. All that is to say, the falling action songs typically are a direct reflection of the fallout of the climax, leading directly to the resolution of the plot. Even purely internal conflict songs like Javert's Suicide and meta-commentary such as Judas's Superstar, which we'll cover more in depth when we discuss emotion and technical song placement, are in service of the plot, expounding upon the way the climax affected the characters and the setting, both the internal and external, essentially. When it comes to the rising action, that's just the rest of the songs in the show, everything leading from the introduction of the story all the way to the climax. So the reason it's important to identify the placement of that climax and whether particular beats fall in the rising or falling action is that you have infinitely more flexibility in the rising action, as the audience doesn't necessarily know where the climax is going to fall, nor what it will be, as from their perspective, the endpoint is not fixed until it happens, the perception of free will. So unlike with the falling action, where there is a fixed endpoint, you have the idea of unlimited possibilities. Getting a little bit more specific, there are other structures for story. Famously, Dan Harmon, the creator of a few of my favorite shows, Community and Rick and Morty, uses his story circle. It's broken down into 8 segments, which read as follows. The reader is in a zone of comfort, but they want something, they enter an unfamiliar situation, they adapt to it, they get what they want, they pay a heavy price for it, then return to their familiar situation, having changed. And we're back to the beginning. I think the best show to analyze from that perspective is, weirdly, Company. Now, Company has a non-linear narrative when it comes to plot, but it does have a linear narrative when it comes to the inner conflict of Bobby. Bobby starts at his birthday party, surrounded by familiarity in the form of friends, company. In observing his friends, he realizes he wants a relationship, the little things you do together. He pursues 3 relationships. You could drive a person crazy. He gets used to the idea of it. Someone is waiting. He has the initiative to actually get serious in response to his friend's hysterics, marry me a little, but ends up with regret when he pushes a little too far without thinking of the consequences, Barcelona. Returning to his friends, the same old as reflected in Side by Side for security, ladies who lunch, to realize that he is finally ready to move forward and really find something real, being alive. You can look at Avenue Q this way for something a little less cerebral. Princeton has found a community where he can commiserate in misery of inadequacy, the Avenue Q theme, but he wants to be and do something more with his life. What do you do with a BA in English? So he pursues a relationship with Kate, mixtape, and has a great time. You can be as loud as the hell you want. And they confess their mutual love for one another very sweetly. Fantasies come true, but he fucks it all up, there's a fine line, but eventually they reconcile, there's a fine line reprise, and Princeton is able to realize that he may never find his purpose, but life will go on anyways, for better or worse, for now. I really do like the story circle, and its counterpart, the tragedy, which ends at step 6, never making it back to the start, for the simple fact of its symmetry. Having a structure which outlines direct relationships between plot points, such as the unfamiliar situation versus the return to the familiar, makes it quite easy to pinpoint options for reprises, as I talked about in a previous video, which I'm sure I'm linking somewhere here, maybe up there, maybe down there, who knows. I do recommend researching other plot structures out there. Every literary theorist and screenplay writer on the face of the earth throughout time has their own preference. I have my own, and it's rather silly, if I'm honest, and I don't really have a name for it. I suppose the radial outline would be it. I don't know. You find the center of the story, which might be the climax, or it might be a character, or even simply the moral lesson, and build it out from there. Looking at my first show, Phantasmagoriana, which is about the summer where Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, the center of the story is Frankenstein. That story. Everything else serves to inspire Mary to write the story as a direct parallel of certain aspects of the novel, even when it comes to the writing of the novel itself. And just like Frankenstein is framed within the structure of the letters of Captain Walton reflecting on the events of the past, Phantasmagoriana is framed within the structure of Claire's return to the Villa Diodati, reflecting on the events of the past. I draw out the plot of my show with a standard outline, but when it comes to song spotting, I'm specifically looking at those aspects which are closest to the center of the show to focus on. If you want to check out my show, you can go on my Patreon and watch it for $1, or even for free if you do the trial. Right now, I only have one version up. The refined version, where I actually played a character, will be posted up sometime next month, I hope, so be sure to sign up for free to be notified when that is posted. Anyhow, regardless of the structure of your plot, there are certain aspects of any plot which may demand a song. The introduction of characters, of setting, of cultural elements, all might be accomplished with songs. However, there are 2 other options: exposition through dialogue and visual action. Never forget when writing a musical that it's not just music and lyrics. You have dialogue and action as well, audio and visual elements to create that full show. The music is only one aspect and should not be the sole tool for expositional purposes. That being said, if there's a lot that needs to be said, don't discount the use of a Greek chorus or a narrator. Then, of course, you have moments of change when the plot has a little bump in the road, which leads to things moving in a new direction, whether that's some external conflict or tension, suspense or anticipation, foreshadowing, irony, celebration, mourning. Essentially, if it's obvious, just put a song there. And I should note before we move on, when it comes to putting in a song for plot purposes, sometimes the moment seems to demand a song for several reasons. As an example, from Company, You Could Drive a Person Crazy serves as a beat of the plot, as well as to introduce Bobby's love interests. But just because a moment seems to have overlapping reasons does not mean that moment is right for that song. As an example, in my own show, again, Percy Shelley almost drowns, and it's a big moment for character growth. I initially had a song where he recounted that harrowing tale and how it changed him because the action of his drowning needed to be covered, and I needed to resolve the conflict of an apparent love triangle, and I needed to show the parallel of his near drowning and change of heart to that of Victor Frankenstein. However, the song just didn't work because of the tone. The moment demanded a certain tenderness with which a wild tale of danger and panic just did not jive. Speaking of a certain tenderness, let's move on to the emotional. There are 3 emotionally charged songs that are often seen as essential in any musical, so let's get those out of the way. The I Am, the I Want, and the 11 o'clock numbers. So let's take a look at these. The I Am number happens towards the start of the show, establishing the emotional baseline for the character and often a tonal baseline for the show. I Feel Pretty from West Side Story gives us Maria's giddiness at her newfound relationship. Dentist from Little Shop of Horrors gives us a good look at our secondary antagonist. Master of the House tells us exactly what kind of people the Thénardiers are. The I Want song gives us the protagonist's or deuteragonists, and very occasionally the antagonist's desire, often with the understanding of the conflicting natures of said desire. My Shot from Hamilton, The Wizard and I from Wicked, Wouldn't It Be Lovely from My Fair Lady. Practically every show has one, and for good reason. It serves as exposition for plot purposes, too. And that 11 o'clock number comes right before or right after the climax, typically as a moment of major character development. Frankly, I think there's no better example than 11 o'clock from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Thank you, Rebecca Bunch / Rachel Bloom. No, it's not theater technically, but it borrows heavily from theater, featuring motifs from iconic numbers throughout the story, leading us to the conclusion of Rebecca's tale. Of course, traditional theater songs include Memory from Cats, Gimme Gimme from Thoroughly Modern Millie, Rose's Turn from Gypsy, Being Alive from Company, and as mentioned previously, Javert's Suicide from Les Miserables. It's the composer's excuse to go nuts and show off exactly how amazing their leading actress is. Moving on, we have discussed external conflict with the plot, but internal conflict is just as important to look at. Moral dilemmas, ethical tensions can lead to some really interesting songs. I really like Twisted Every Way from Phantom of the Opera for this particular thing as an example, as it's such a short little moment, but so compelling that Weber felt the need to reprise it in its controversial sequel, Love Never Dies. The great thing about these moments is that an essay-long philosophical debate can be summarized in a few lines of song, saving time for the actors and patience for the audience. And of course, after those moments, you have the release of tension. In Love Never Dies, that release is also the 11 o'clock number, the title number, and that is fantastic, even if the show isn't, and that is the worst song in the show. But it's still a great example of this particular type of song. Other times you want to release that tension through a little comic relief or something else. A Little Priest from Sweeney Todd is a rather dark example of this. Sweeney came so close to getting everything he wanted and lost it all, so now he's gonna murder everyone in sight, but instead of ending on a dark note with Epiphany, we end the first act with a fun, silly pun song for 10 minutes about murder. On a lighter note, The Rain in Spain in My Fair Lady comes after Eliza has been trying and failing to learn what Higgins so desperately wishes to teach her, and when it finally clicks together, think of it like a splash of wine in a nice soup, just a touch of acidity to brighten the whole thing up. Anyhow, another song placement thing. At times you'll have 2 more characters that suddenly come together. Think Do You Hear the People Sing from Les Miserables, or It Takes Two from Into the Woods, and find common ground, unity, and decisively move forward together. Similarly, you have romantic songs, the love songs where a couple first gets together, or perhaps a reconciliation or a milestone in their combined journey. I don't need to list examples of those, but I'll give you an example of one I hate from the musical I've already referenced. All I Ask of You from Phantom. Ugh. It's at such a climactic moment of the plot where the Phantom literally murdered someone. We get a flurry of panic from Christine and denial from Raoul, and rather than seeing it through to its conclusion, we spend like 10 minutes yelling at each other about wanting to be whisked away on horseback, and then go back downstairs to finish the opera. What? The plot demands that you either release the tension or build on it, not have a segue to something completely unrelated and pointless and unfounded. Ugh, the only reason it works at all is because the Phantom has that little verse after they're done where he brings down the chandelier to cue the intermission. And even then, the tension and the horror from the murderer has just disappeared, so it doesn't hit as hard as it could have. Ugh. Missed opportunity there, Weber. One last emotional reason for a song to mention. Sometimes you need to put a spotlight on a secondary character, or characters, to highlight their foil to the protagonist or antagonist. My favorite example of this is in Beauty and the Beast, actually, with human again. The staff of the house sings wistfully of their wish to be, well, human again, just like the Beast, but it's not the Beast that the song really makes us think about. No, it's actually Belle. They aren't just singing about having their bodies back, they're talking about what it means to be human, which to them is being something other than utilitarian, doing the job that society expects of them, and actually being a part of that society. Belle, as we saw from the very start, simply does not fit into society, and my god, this song is the only one in the whole damn show that really shows the yearning that she doesn't let herself have. The line, "When we're human again, only human again, when the world once more starts making sense." They want to return to what they had before, but Belle has never had that sense of belonging, but she and we can witness the echoes of it in this song, and it's simply perfect. Anyhow, our last item on the list is the technical. Listen, sometimes you just gotta put in a song because of logistical reasons. As an example, in my show, which I know I'm referencing it a lot, but that's because I know why things happen because I wrote it. Anyways, in my show, the actor who plays Lord Byron needs time to change into another costume towards the end of the show, so I initially had 2 songs inserted between a duet that he sang and the song where he has to come out again in a new costume. This is a very common reason for what's known as that song in every musical that no one likes, written by Sarah Smallwood Parsons and Adrian Pellerin. I'll put a link to it somewhere. They can explain it better than I can. Another reason for a song is that we simply just haven't had one in a while, and one needs to be inserted for pacing reasons. As an example, Something Good and I Have Confidence from the film version of The Sound of Music, which is why their lyrics aren't quite as memorable as the rest, given Hammerstein's death prior to the creation of the film. Not to say these sorts of songs aren't great. I Have Confidence is personally my favorite song from the whole show. However, some of these songs end up getting cut because you realize that they simply are not necessary, or otherwise lead to emotional ambiguity that confuddles the point of the whole thing. A great example is the songs that would eventually be replaced by Being Alive and Company, A Multitude of Amy's, which was a proposal to a girl named Amy, which I suppose felt too conclusive for what is supposed to be an ambiguous ending. Then you have the second iteration, Happily Ever After, which the producers thought was a bit too much of a downer. Being Alive gave an ending that wasn't conclusively happy, nor inconclusively sad, but instead optimistic and resolute and perfect. Then, of course, you have the other side of pacing, a long stretch of time where either nothing is happening, or the status quo is being maintained, or one thing continuously happens. This is solved in a montage sequence. Think Joanna from Sweeney Todd, or And the Money Kept Rolling In from Evita, Non-Stop from Hamilton. Often these songs are an excuse to show off the composer's prowess. Certainly the case for Joanna, I think, with the overlap lines of the quartet. I wrote a montage sequence into my own show called Fugue, which is one of my favorite little things, as I am a big fan of writing rounds. It's the thing I started doing back in high school, and I think I'll probably end up putting one in every show I write if I can get away with it. Next, we have the meta commentary. I told y'all we'd come back to Superstar. That and songs like it that break the fourth wall are sometimes necessary to hammer the point home, not to hit the audience over the head with a moral lesson, but to tie the whole show together with a neat little bow. I mentioned introducing cultures as a plot reason for a song, and Tradition from Fiddler on the Roof is a great example of this too, with Tevye directly addressing the audience. You have Comedy Tonight from A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, informing the audience on what's going to happen. You and Me, but Mostly Me from Book of Mormon gives us a really good understanding of our leads. Opening number from Title of Show sets the stage, quite literally, for the whole show, which by its very nature is meta as hell. The song that goes like this from Spamalot is a terrific takedown of the typical dramatic love ballad, fully fitting in the comedy, and so on. But my favorite is the final number of The Drowsy Chaperone, one of my favorite shows ever, where our lead finally sing, and the characters step out of the record, fulfilling the joy of the man in the chair, so even though he's feeling blue, he's no longer alone, and neither is the audience. And it's just beautiful. Then you have the awards show song. The song inserted in the show purely for the sake of the Tony bait. If it doesn't fit the show, but it sure does fit on the Tony Awards stage. I know a song just came to mind for you, but I'm not gonna go into this any further. I don't want to insult anyone. For the record, there's nothing wrong with writing a spectacle. Just make sure you're not writing it solely for the sake of having a showstopper. There are finally the obvious songs that everyone simply expects to see. The opener, the Act 1 closer, the Act 2 opener, the finale. We've already discussed the opener and finale, so looking at the Act 1 closer, we typically have a song that wraps up the action, preparing us for what's coming next. Usually, this is a great spot for that showstopper I just mentioned. Sunday in the Park with George, you have Sunday, Defying Gravity from Wicked, and so on. And then the Act 2 opener is a tone reset, preparing us for the rest of the show after everyone used the restroom during intermission. Think God That's Good from Sweeney Todd, What I Miss from Hamilton, I Didn't Plan It from Waitress. So I think that's fairly comprehensive when it comes to the various reasons you might need a song in a show. But there's something else we've got to discuss. Occasionally, you'll watch a musical and realize that there's a song missing, a moment that would have been perfect. This happens to composers, too. Sondheim famously has 2 songs, his 2 best songs, some would argue, that he wrote in the 11th hour. Both 11 o'clock numbers, Being Alive and Send in the Clowns. But sometimes those songs are completely missed. I think the most obvious example is, again, Sondheim, given that this was sort of a habit for him. With his final show, Here We Are. The second act is barren when it comes to songs, given his passing, and there's a particular moment where it's painfully obvious there should have been a song. The Bishop and Marianne, the 2 ditziest people in the cast, talk about the meaning of life being the fact that we exist at all for whatever precious time we have, that here we are. God, it would have been the title song, and it's simply devastating that it doesn't exist. And then there's another example that's been around since the 70s. Again, Sondheim. In Company. Peter and Bobby share a little conversation where Peter asks if Bobby has ever had a homosexual experience. Bobby answers yes, but denies actually being anything other than straight. This moment is a very vulnerable moment that's practically begging for an intimate song of self-reflection, the question of identity. How can you be in a relationship with someone if you don't know who you are to start? But Sondheim vehemently hated queer readings of the character of Bobby for whatever reason, so that song also simply does not exist. In my own musical, Phantasmagoria, there is a missing song. I didn't know until my actors pointed it out to me, and now it's far too late to put it in. A song about your creation getting away from you, going beyond what you wanted not in a good way, foreshadowing the relationship between Victor Frankenstein and his creature, and of course, as a duet between Mary and Byron, the 2 biggest figures in the whole show, who literally never share the stage together, just 2 of them in the entire freaking show. Oh my god, an oversight on my part, for sure. But hey, that's just the nature of creating things. You aren't going to get it right. You're going to miss things, and you're going to put in stuff that wasn't necessary. That's what the workshopping phase is for. And revivals are your chance to fix what was only realized upon performance. Art is not meant to be perfect. It is simply meant to be. And obsessing on perfection will only lead to that art never getting made. I hope this video helps serve as a guide to you for whatever reason you might need it. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and subscribe. Ring that little bell to be notified next week when I post a new video about how I'm going to approach the immersive aspect of my new musical, just in time for the start of Immersive Phantom. And you better believe I'm going to give my thoughts on what we know so far about the upcoming masquerade. If you want to see that video early, check out my Patreon, where I post regular updates about my work and these videos as soon as they're edited, so you don't have to wait. I'll see y'all next time. Bye, everybody!